The most dangerous lie in the galaxy is not that someone is evil. It is that someone is worthless. Red dust swept through the marketplace in long waves, hissing across rusted metal walkways and rattling loose sheets of alloy hanging from ancient storefronts. Neon signs flickered overhead in dozens of languages, while merchants shouted prices over the constant drone of cargo lifters and transport shuttles descending from the gray sky. Ryan Walker adjusted the heavy crate resting against his shoulder and pushed through the crowd. The frontier world of Karth Station was exactly the kind of place he disliked. Too many people, too much noise, too many individuals trying to sell things nobody needed. He had only come for replacement coolant regulators and enough food supplies to last the next freight route. Nothing more. Nothing complicated. Then he saw the sign. At first it was only a glimpse between moving bodies. A piece of white metal hanging above a narrow platform near the center of the market. Ryan would have ignored it if not for the wording. Take her. She is useless. He slowed. Around him, hundreds of shoppers continued walking without a second glance. A pair of traders laughed while negotiating a shipment. A maintenance crew rolled equipment across the street. An elderly alien vendor argued with a customer over fruit prices. Nobody appeared interested in the sign. Nobody appeared interested in the person sitting beneath it. Ryan stopped completely. The girl sat with her hands secured loosely in front of her by simple restraints attached to a metal post. She was not struggling, not crying, not asking for help. She simply sat there beneath the hanging sign, while the entire marketplace flowed around her like water around a stone. Her skin was a soft shade of blue unlike any human complexion. Silver-white hair fell across her shoulders, catching flashes of neon light as people passed. Large violet eyes stared toward the ground. She looked young, tired, quiet. More than anything, she looked defeated. Ryan frowned. Something felt wrong. Not because she was restrained. Frontier markets had strange customs. Not because she was being displayed. He had seen worse things during his years moving cargo across unsettled sectors. No, what bothered him was everyone else. Nobody looked at her. Not once. The crowd avoided even turning their heads in her direction. A child began to point toward her before his mother quickly lowered his hand and guided him away. Two dockworkers changed routes rather than pass near the platform. Even security officers patrolling the district kept their eyes forward as they walked by. Ryan shifted the crate on his shoulder and studied the girl again. She never reacted. It was as though she expected nothing else. Then, for the briefest moment, her gaze lifted. Their eyes met across the crowded street. Ryan felt an unexpected knot form in his chest. There was no anger in her expression, no resentment, no hope either. It was the look of someone who had spent a very long time being forgotten. The noise of the marketplace faded into the background. Ryan looked at the sign, then at the girl, then back at the sign. He had come to buy parts and leave. Instead, he found himself setting the crate down beside a vendor stall and walking toward the platform. Somewhere behind him, an old merchant muttered a quiet curse under his breath. Ryan did not hear the words. He only noticed that as he approached the girl, the people nearby suddenly began moving away. The closer Ryan moved toward the platform, the quieter the marketplace seemed to become. It was not actual silence. Merchants still shouted. Engines still hummed overhead. Cargo haulers still rolled across the metal streets. Yet conversations nearby softened, as though people suddenly had somewhere else to be. Ryan noticed it immediately. A group of traders abandoned a negotiation table. A customer stepped away from a food stall before completing a purchase. Even the old merchant who had muttered under his breath moments earlier turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. The girl remained seated. She did not react to the growing empty space surrounding them. Ryan stopped a few feet from the platform and studied her more carefully. The restraints around her wrists looked simple, functional, almost symbolic. Her clothing was plain gray fabric, worn but clean. Nothing about her appearance suggested danger. Nothing explained why an entire marketplace behaved as though she did not exist. Finally, Ryan looked around and raised his voice. Who was responsible for her? The question lingered in the air. Nobody answered. Several people looked away. Others pretended not to hear. After a few seconds, a narrow door behind the platform slid open with a metallic hiss. A thin alien male stepped outside carrying a data tablet. His green skin was faded with age, and deep lines framed both sides of his face. He glanced at Ryan, then at the girl, and sighed heavily. You should keep walking, human. Ryan folded his arms. That is not an answer. The older alien rubbed his forehead. You are interested in buying her? Ryan looked back at the girl. She had lowered her eyes again. I am interested in understanding why she is sitting here. The alien laughed quietly. There was no amusement in the sound. People asked that question once. He pointed toward the girl. Then they stopped asking. Ryan frowned. Why? The alien hesitated. For a moment, he seemed to debate whether the conversation was worth having. Then he motioned toward a nearby bench beneath a flickering neon sign. 5 minutes, he said. After that, I want you gone. Ryan sat. The alien remained standing. Dust drifted between them while distant transport lights flashed across the crowded market. Her name is Salira, the alien said. She has been here for 3 months. Ryan glanced toward her. And nobody wants her. The sign already told me that. The alien exhaled slowly. You think people abandoned her because she failed at something? That would make sense. The truth is stranger. Ryan waited. Every settlement she joins experiences problems. What kind of problems? The kind that make people nervous. The alien tapped his data tablet. Businesses fail. Equipment malfunctions. Important projects collapse. Colonies miss projections. Investors lose money. Ryan blinked. That sounds like coincidence. That is what the first owners thought. The alien turned the tablet toward him. Hundreds of records filled the screen. Names, dates, contracts, sponsorships, adoptions, employment agreements. Every entry ended the same way. Terminated, released, returned. Ryan stared at the list. How many? 37 documented owners. Ryan looked up. 37. That we know about. The alien lowered the tablet. Nobody keeps her. Ryan glanced back toward Salira. The blue-skinned girl sat exactly where she had before, surrounded by an invisible circle of avoidance. Not dangerous, not aggressive, just alone. Then something unexpected happened. A cargo crane operating across the street suddenly powered down. The massive machine froze in place. Nearby lights flickered once before stabilizing. Workers exchanged confused looks. The alien closed his eyes as though witnessing a familiar headache. Ryan followed his gaze. Then he noticed something else. Salira never looked surprised. She simply lowered her head a little further, as if she already knew everyone would blame her. The cargo crane restarted 30 seconds later. Its engines hummed back to life. Workers returned to their tasks. Conversations resumed. Within minutes, the marketplace behaved as though nothing unusual had happened. Ryan noticed something important. Nobody seemed surprised. The malfunction had barely earned a second glance. It was not a shocking event. It was an expected one. The older alien slipped the data tablet beneath his arm. Now you understand. Ryan looked across the street. Salira remained seated beneath the faded sign. Not really. The alien frowned. Human, I just explained everything. No, Ryan shook his head. You explained what people believe. The alien's expression hardened. And after 37 owners, you think all of them were wrong? Ryan did not answer immediately. He watched Salira instead. Every few seconds someone passed nearby. Every few seconds they deliberately looked somewhere else. The pattern repeated so often it became impossible to ignore. Eventually Ryan stood and walked toward the platform. The alien sighed loudly behind him. You are making a mistake. Maybe. Ryan kept walking. I have made plenty of those. The metal deck creaked beneath his boots as he approached. This time he stopped directly in front of Salira. Up close, she looked even younger than he first thought. Not physically, emotionally. There was a weariness in her eyes that did not belong on someone her age. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Ryan crouched slightly to place himself at eye level. Hello. Salira blinked. The greeting seemed to catch her off guard. Hello. Her voice was soft, careful, like someone handling fragile glass. Ryan nodded toward the restraints. Comfortable. To his surprise, the corner of her mouth moved slightly. Not a smile. Something close. Not particularly. Good. Ryan leaned back against the platform. I was worried you might enjoy this. For the first time, she actually looked at him. Her glowing violet eyes studied his face. Measuring. Searching. You are not from this world. That obvious? You stopped. Ryan glanced around the market. Apparently that makes me unusual. It makes you temporary. The answer came instantly. Ryan frowned. Temporary. Salira lowered her gaze. You will leave too. There was no bitterness in her voice. That bothered him more than anger would have. She sounded completely certain, as though she were commenting on tomorrow's weather. Ryan folded his arms. You seem confident. Experience. Silence settled between them. The wind carried another wave of red dust through the marketplace. Neon reflections danced across the metal streets. Somewhere overhead, a transport shuttle thundered toward the spaceport. Finally, Ryan asked the question that had been bothering him from the beginning. Why do they call you useless? Salira stared at the ground. Several seconds passed, then several more. Ryan thought she might refuse to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because bad things happen. Ryan waited. And that is enough. He studied her face carefully. No defensiveness. No self-pity. Just acceptance. The kind that develops after hearing the same accusation for years. Ryan looked up at the sign hanging above her. Then back at her. Something about the entire situation felt incomplete. Like a story with missing pages. Then he noticed a small identification tag attached to the restraint post. Property transfer. Record. Curious, Ryan stepped closer and brushed away a layer of dust. The screen flickered to life. A long list of former owners appeared. 37 names. 37 transfers. Then Ryan saw something strange. Every explanation field had been deleted. Every single one. Ryan stared at the transfer record for several seconds. 37 former owners. 37 deleted explanations. The pattern was too deliberate to ignore. Records disappeared for a reason. Someone had removed them. Not one or two. All of them. He tapped the display again. Same result. Empty fields stretched down the entire list, like missing pages torn from a book. Who deleted these? He asked. Salira did not answer. Ryan looked over his shoulder toward the older alien standing near the edge of the platform. You run this place. You must know. The alien's expression immediately tightened. Some questions cost more than answers are worth. Ryan almost laughed. That sounds suspicious. It sounds practical. The older alien crossed his arms. Human, if you are looking for a mystery, buy a puzzle box. If you are looking for trouble, keep standing where you are. Ryan glanced back at the list. The missing information bothered him more with every passing second. If Salira truly caused disasters, people would have documented them. They would have preserved evidence. Instead, somebody had erased every explanation. That was not how fear worked. Fear loved records. Fear collected proof. Ryan looked at Salira. Do you know why the reports were removed? Her glowing eyes lifted toward him. For the first time, genuine uncertainty appeared on her face. No, nobody ever told you. She shook her head slowly. Nobody talks about it for long. The answer lingered in his mind. Nobody talks about it for long. Before Ryan could ask another question, a sharp electronic tone echoed through the marketplace. Several merchants immediately checked handheld devices. Nearby display screens flickered. A transport schedule vanished from one monitor and reappeared moments later. Minor disruptions. Small enough to ignore. Large enough to notice. Around the platform, people began moving away again. Not running. Not panicking. Simply creating distance. Ryan watched them carefully. They were not reacting to a threat. They were reacting to expectation. They believed something bad would happen because Salira was present. The belief seemed almost automatic. A young maintenance technician paused beside a kiosk long enough to notice Ryan standing near her. You should leave, he said quietly. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Why? The technician hesitated. Because it starts small. Then he walked away before Ryan could ask anything else. Ryan looked back toward Salira. She was watching the ground again. How long have you been sitting here? 87 days. Ryan blinked. The answer came too quickly. She had counted every one. And nobody took you? A faint smile touched her face. It carried no happiness. Many people looked. The smile disappeared. Looking and staying are different things. The wind pushed another cloud of red dust through the market. Neon lights shimmered against the haze. Somewhere above them, cargo engines roared as a freighter climbed into the sky. Ryan studied the restraint attached to the post. It was old. Scratched. Barely necessary. He had seen prisoners secured with stronger equipment. Salira probably could have escaped if she truly wanted to. The realization struck him unexpectedly. Why did you stay? She looked at him. What? Ryan nodded toward the restraint. You could have left. For several seconds, she simply stared at him. Then her gaze drifted toward the sign hanging above her head. After a while, she said softly, you begin believing people. Ryan followed her eyes upward. The words on the sign seemed uglier now than they had before. He looked at Salira, then at the restraint, then back at the sign. Something inside him settled into place. The same feeling he experienced whenever he found a broken engine everyone else wanted to replace. The quiet certainty that people had stopped asking the right questions. Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out his credit slate. Across the marketplace, several people noticed the movement and immediately went silent. The marketplace seemed to freeze around Ryan. Conversations stopped midway through. Sentences. A merchant dropped a data stylus onto his counter and did not bother picking it up. Even the wind felt quieter. The older alien stared at the credit slate in Ryan's hand as though it were a dangerous object. Human, he said carefully, think about this. Ryan looked up. I am. Not enough. The alien stepped closer and lowered his voice. People always think they will be different. Ryan glanced toward Salira. She had not moved. If anything, she looked more confused than anyone else. I am not trying to be different. The alien laughed once. That is exactly what the others said. Ryan held out the credit slate. How much? The older alien closed his eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he named a number. Ryan barely reacted. He transferred the credits immediately. The confirmation tone echoed from both devices. Somewhere nearby, someone whispered a curse. The alien looked down at the completed transaction and shook his head slowly. You just bought yourself a problem. No. Ryan nodded toward Salira. I bought her freedom. The older alien hesitated. Then he entered a release code into the restraint controls. A soft electronic chime sounded. The lock disengaged. The metal restraint loosened and slid open around Salira's wrists. Nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. The marketplace simply watched. Ryan noticed something strange. Several people looked disappointed, as though they expected him to back out at the last second. Salira stared at her freed hands. Her expression did not change. Ryan had expected relief, happiness, gratitude. Instead, she looked uncertain, almost frightened. You are free, he said. She looked up at him. Why? The question came so quickly it felt rehearsed. Ryan frowned. Because nobody should sit there. That is not an answer. Ryan considered that. Maybe she was right. He searched for something deeper, some grand explanation. Nothing came. Finally, he shrugged. It is the only answer I have. Salira lowered her eyes. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she slowly stood. The movement seemed to surprise the crowd as much as it surprised her. 87 days in one place had apparently convinced everyone she belonged there, including herself. Ryan picked up the crate he had abandoned earlier. Come on. Salira blinked. Where? My ship. She stared at him. You are taking me with you? Only if you want to come. The silence stretched between them. Ryan could almost see the conflict behind her eyes. Hope fighting experience. Curiosity fighting disappointment. Eventually she spoke. You should not. Why? Her gaze drifted toward the people watching from a distance. Because they are usually right. Ryan followed her eyes. Everywhere he looked, people were avoiding direct eye contact. Nobody stepped closer. Nobody offered congratulations. Nobody even seemed surprised. They simply waited, waiting for another inevitable failure. Ryan adjusted the crate against his shoulder. Maybe. He started walking toward the spaceport. After several steps, he realized she was not following. Ryan turned around. Salira still stood beside the platform, staring at the empty restraint hanging from the post. You coming? He asked. For the first time since he had met her, something changed in her expression. Not happiness, not trust, just the smallest spark of possibility. Then she stepped away from the platform and followed him into the crowd. The walk to the spaceport felt longer than it should have. Ryan carried the crate beneath one arm, while Salira followed several steps behind. Nobody stopped them. Nobody protested. Yet everywhere they went, people watched. Reflections moved behind shop windows. Conversations paused when they passed. The attention felt less like curiosity and more like anticipation, as though everyone expected the same ending they had seen before. The giant docking towers of Karth Station rose above the horizon like steel mountains, their navigation lights blinking against the darkening sky. Freight engines rumbled through the evening air. Ryan reached docking bay 32 and keyed the access panel. Hydraulic motors groaned as the cargo ramp descended from his aging transport ship. Warm air drifted out carrying the familiar scent of machine oil, recycled oxygen, and old electronics. Home. Ryan stepped aboard and set the crate down inside the cargo hold. When he turned around, Salira remained standing at the bottom of the ramp. She stared at the ship without moving. "It does not bite," Ryan said. Her eyes lifted toward him. "That is not what worries me." Ryan leaned against the doorway. "Then what does?" Salira looked away. The last owner said the same thing. The answer lingered in the air. Ryan did not ask what happened to the last owner. He had a feeling he already knew the ending. "Well," he said, "my ship complains constantly, leaks coolant twice a year, and refuses to die. If bad luck could destroy it, that would have happened long ago." To his surprise, the faintest hint of amusement crossed her face. Then she finally stepped aboard. The cargo ramp sealed behind them with a deep metallic thud. For several minutes, neither spoke. Salira quietly observed the interior while Ryan completed pre-flight checks. The ship was not impressive. Scratched bulkheads lined the corridors. Maintenance panels displayed years of repairs. Storage containers occupied half the cargo bay. Everything looked used. Everything worked. Mostly. Ryan sat in the cockpit reviewing departure clearance requests when an alert appeared on the screen. Cargo route authorization, denied. He frowned. That had never happened before. He submitted the request again. Denied. A third time. Denied. Ryan checked the reason code. None existed. "That is new," he muttered. Behind him, Salira became very still. Ryan noticed immediately. "You have seen this before." She stared at the floor. "Sometimes." Ryan opened a communication channel with station traffic control. Static answered. He tried a different frequency. Nothing. Then the cockpit lights flickered once. Not enough to trigger alarms. Just enough to notice. Ryan leaned back slowly. Across the room, Salira closed her eyes. "You should have left me there," she said quietly. Ryan looked at her. "Why?" Her voice sounded smaller than before. "Because this is how it starts." Outside the viewport, hundreds of ships continued moving through the busy spaceport exactly as before. Everything appeared normal. Yet somewhere deep inside the station network, something had already begun changing. Ryan stared at the dark communication panel for several seconds. Static continued hissing through the speakers like distant rain. Station traffic control always answered. Always. Karth Station processed thousands of departures every day. Silence was not normal. He tried a private frequency used by independent freight captains. Nothing. Another channel. Nothing. Across the cockpit, Salira sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat. She did not appear surprised. That bothered him more than the malfunction itself. Outside the viewport, docking crews continued moving between ships. Cargo loaders crossed illuminated platforms. Maintenance drones floated through the air on routine assignments. The station looked completely healthy. Yet every system Ryan touched seemed determined not to cooperate. A warning notification appeared on the navigation display. Route authorization request expired. Ryan frowned. That is impossible. He had submitted the request less than 10 minutes earlier. Before he could investigate further, another screen flickered. Then another. Small glitches. Harmless on their own. Together, they formed a pattern. Ryan leaned back and folded his arms. "Tell me exactly what usually happens." Salira stared out the viewport. "You already know." "Pretend I do not." She hesitated. "First come the inconveniences." Ryan glanced at the dead communication panel. "Fair enough. Then people become frustrated." Her voice remained calm, almost detached. "They start losing opportunities, missing schedules, making mistakes." Ryan looked toward the station beyond the glass. Hundreds of lights blinked against the darkness. And eventually, Salira lowered her eyes. "Eventually they decide I am not worth the trouble." The words lingered in the cockpit. Ryan studied her expression. She was not trying to convince him. She genuinely believed it. Years of repetition had transformed other people's assumptions into her reality. A sudden chime interrupted the silence. Ryan turned toward the engineering monitor. A maintenance archive had opened on its own. He frowned. He had not touched the system. Lines of data scrolled across the display. Cargo manifests. Fuel logs. Repair histories. Then the screen stopped moving. One entry remained highlighted. Unknown file detected. Ryan sat forward. "What is this?" The file carried no date. No origin. No author identification. Curious, he opened it. The display filled with fragments of old reports. Colony records. Economic projections. Infrastructure assessments. Most were damaged or incomplete. Yet one detail appeared repeatedly. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Every location connected to Salira showed the same pattern. Initial setbacks, equipment failures, financial losses, public complaints, then something else. Survival. He opened another report. Same result. Another. Same result again. A mining colony that lost half its equipment during a solar storm but avoided total destruction. A research outpost that suffered communication failures days before an asteroid field passed nearby. An agricultural settlement that experienced system disruptions shortly before a planetary climate emergency. Ryan kept reading. The pattern grew stronger with every document. None of the settlements thrived immediately, yet all of them survived disasters that should have destroyed them. Ryan slowly looked toward Salira. She sat quietly beside the viewport, completely unaware of what he was seeing. "That does not make sense," he whispered. Outside the ship, station lights suddenly dimmed for a fraction of a second before returning to normal. Throughout the docking district, people paused and looked around. Then everything continued as before. Ryan barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on the growing collection of reports. For the first time since entering the marketplace, he found evidence that did not support the story everyone believed. And the deeper he searched, the more it looked like the galaxy had misunderstood Salira completely. Ryan read through the reports until his eyes began to blur. The deeper he searched, the stranger the pattern became. Every colony connected to Salira had suffered setbacks. Every settlement had experienced technical failures, economic losses, or administrative chaos. Those facts were real. Those facts had become legends. But the reports hidden beneath the public records told a completely different story. Ryan opened another file. The colony had blamed Salira for a series of system disruptions. Weeks later, an underground reactor fault had been discovered. Without the earlier malfunctions, nobody would have inspected the infrastructure in time. Thousands of lives had been saved. Another report described communication outages at a remote agricultural settlement. Residents blamed her immediately. 3 days later, the outages revealed a navigation error that would have redirected supply ships away from the colony for months. Ryan opened another, then another. Every story followed the same structure. Initial inconvenience, public frustration, eventual survival. He leaned back slowly. "No," he whispered. "That cannot be coincidence." Across the cockpit, Salira looked up. "What?" Ryan turned one of the displays toward her. "Look at this." She hesitated before approaching. Her glowing violet eyes moved across the reports. At first she appeared confused. Then her expression gradually changed. Ryan watched her carefully. "Did anyone ever show you these?" Salira shook her head. "I was never allowed access." Ryan opened another file. This one contained research notes from a scientific outpost she had lived at years earlier. Most of the data had been erased, but one section survived. He read it aloud. Subject demonstrates statistically impossible sensitivity to emerging system instability. Predictive correlation exceeds accepted biological probability models. Salira stared at the screen. "What does that mean?" Ryan smiled for the first time in hours. "I think it means the galaxy got you completely backward." The cockpit fell silent. Outside the viewport, station lights continued blinking against the darkness. Ryan enlarged the research notes. Additional fragments appeared. Biological scans, neurological studies, probability models. Most were damaged. One sentence remained intact. He read it twice before speaking. The subject appears capable of detecting cascading failures before conventional monitoring systems recognize them. Salira blinked. "Detecting failures?" Ryan nodded. "Not causing them." For a moment, she simply stared at him. The idea seemed impossible for her to process. Years of rejection do not disappear because of a single report. "That cannot be right," she whispered. "People always blamed me." Ryan looked back at the records. Because the warning arrived before the disaster. Understanding spread slowly across his face. The equipment failures, the project delays, the disruptions, they were symptoms. He turned toward her. "Every place you lived experienced problems because something was already wrong." Salira's hands tightened slightly. "Then why did nobody realize it?" Ryan looked at the deleted records, the erased explanations, the missing reports. Suddenly the answer felt obvious. Because it was easier to blame one person than investigate complicated problems. The words hung between them. Outside the ship, another brief flicker passed through the station lights. This time Ryan barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on the woman standing beside the console. For years the galaxy had called her useless. Yet every surviving report suggested something extraordinary. Salira was not a source of disaster. She was an early warning system no civilization had understood. And for the first time in her life, someone had finally found the evidence. The station lights stabilized completely an hour later. Communication systems returned. Departure requests resumed processing. One by one, the small inconveniences that had spread through Karth Station quietly disappeared. Yet Ryan barely noticed. He sat in the cockpit surrounded by reports, archived research files, and decades of ignored evidence. Across from him, Salira remained silent. Not because she disagreed with the findings, because she did not know what to do with them. For 25 years, the galaxy had given her a single explanation. She was the problem. Now that explanation was falling apart. Ryan finally stood and stretched. Come with me. Salira looked up. Where? Back to the market. Her eyes widened slightly. Why would we go back there? Ryan smiled. Because I dislike unfinished jobs. An hour later, they stepped from the cargo ship and crossed the station toward the same crowded marketplace where they had met. The evening crowd had returned. Neon signs glowed above the streets. Merchants advertised products. Cargo drones drifted overhead. Everything looked exactly as it had before. Yet Ryan saw it differently now. He saw people living comfortably because warnings had arrived before disasters. He saw a civilization that had mistaken the messenger for the problem. The platform still stood in the center of the market. The old restraint remained attached to the post. The faded sign still hung overhead. Several people recognized Salira immediately. Conversations softened. Curious eyes followed her movement through the crowd. The older alien merchant emerged from his office and froze when he saw them returning together. You are back, he said cautiously. Looks that way. Ryan climbed onto the platform. Before anyone could ask what he was doing, he reached up and removed the old sign. Dust drifted into the air as the metal panel came free. The marketplace grew quieter. Salira stared at him. Ryan. He ignored the warning in her voice. Instead, he activated a portable display projector and connected it to the archive files he had recovered. Screens throughout the marketplace flickered to life. Research reports appeared. Colony records. Survival statistics. Historical data. People stopped walking. Merchants leaned forward. Curious faces turned toward the information. Ryan spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Every settlement that blamed her survived disasters that should have destroyed them. More people gathered. Every report that proved it was hidden. He displayed another file. Then another. The evidence spoke for itself. Nobody argued. Nobody interrupted. For the first time, the crowd looked directly at Salira instead of away from her. Not with fear. With confusion. With realization. Ryan looked down at the old sign in his hands. Then he placed it on the platform floor and activated the display surface. New words appeared across the metal. The reason we survived. Silence spread through the marketplace. Complete silence. Salira stared at the message. Her glowing violet eyes reflected the bright letters. Ryan stepped down from the platform and stood beside her. Neither spoke. No. Dramatic speeches were necessary. The truth had already arrived. Around them, people continued reading the reports. Continued looking at the evidence. Continued reconsidering everything they thought they knew. After a long moment, Salira looked up at the stars visible beyond the station roofline. The expression on her face was unfamiliar. Not sadness. Not resignation. Peace. Ryan followed her gaze. The galaxy had called her useless because it was easier than asking questions. Easier than understanding. Easier than admitting they were wrong. But some truths survive even when nobody wants them. And sometimes all it takes is one stubborn human willing to stop walking. The marketplace lights reflected in Salira's eyes as she watched the stars. For the first time in her life, she was not wondering why nobody wanted her. She was finally learning her worth.